What is up, Casey? How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi.
So we've got today the truth about prescription costs.
Yes.
And we're going to get into specifically first, let's get into the problem.
Okay.
Why don't I go to Walgreens or these other places? Why is something that probably should be $30 is $200?
So first of all, this podcast is going to talk a lot about how businesses can save money, but individuals certainly
Right.
We all end up paying the price of these things. And so the problem is that since 1987, prescription drug benefit costs, so this is employer aggregate, has increased by 1,150% since 1987.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of inflation. That has outpaced everything else. And so that's huge, right? Obviously, right off the bat. In addition to that, and this is the part that individuals feel, of course, companies are feeling this in a major way, is that patient costs have increased by 182% since 1987. And so every individual listening to this knows that they're paying more out of pocket when they go to the pharmacy. Nobody knows why, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
And since employers are the main provider of insurance,
correct,
then they're eating some of this cost, or how does that?
They bear the brunt of all things, of all healthcare costs in this country. They support most of it, and it's a crumbling empire.
So what are the two things, like the main drivers for the pricing of drugs being through the roof like it is?
So all complex problems have complex answers,
right.
But there's two main drivers. One is the big pharma companies, and they get made out to be these big devils, and there's all these exposés and stories about the bad actors in the pharmaceutical companies. So most people know that already, and we'll get into a little bit of that. But pharmacy benefit managers, they're the little quiet monster in the corner that's gobbling up most of that 1,150% increase.
So a pharmacy benefit manager would be the middleman.
Exactly.
Right.
That's how they're referred to. So we'll get into their history in a second, but they're collecting big fees. They're extracting big fees.
and so how does the pharmacy benefit manager deal with the employer? Like if I have an entrepreneur right now and he has 40 employees,
right?
Why is the pharmacy benefit manager such the evil bad guy?
And why are we using them, right?
Right.
So health insurance companies, you get your broker, they come in, they talk to you, they say, this is what it's going to cost for this health insurance. And the company will look at all the different options and choose a few of them, or they'll choose one of them and with different levels of coverage. And the PBM just kind of comes with it, typically. And it's next to impossible, if not actually impossible, to carve out and say, no, I want to use this health insurance company, but I want to use this PBM. It's almost impossible for a company to do that because they're all in bed with each other.
Oh, okay.
The health insurance company owns the PBM or vice versa. And then a lot of times there's a pharmacy that's also owned in that column.
So you're getting hit 3 times.
You're getting yep.
Wow, that's crazy.
It is. It's monopolies, and there's 3 PBMs in the country, 3 major ones, and they're accountable for about 76% of all of our prescriptions, all of them throughout the country.
I didn't realize that until I didn't realize how things can get monopolized until I won't say the company, but there's an insurance company that has huge offices everywhere, and then they put people on the board in each state, and then those people, that state will end up, having laws that are favorable towards them, and you have to use them or you get, ostracized.
Yes.
So it's pretty crazy. Is it kind of almost like the same thing with?
So New Mexico benefits from, and I know you have listeners outside New Mexico, but we do benefit that we have 2 major players in our state. But there are states in this country that there is one major player, and you play the game or you're out.
Wow. That's crazy. So they actually have a true monopoly. Even 2, because they can 2 people can kind of control costs.
Yeah, so far so good around here that the competition has kept things fairly reasonable. Although the worst gouging story is out of Carlsbad, New Mexico, and there's a whole chapter in a book that we won't really talk about today, but that's actually the worst story. It was in a book, actually.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I think it was even on Dateline. There was a whole thing on it.
That they picked Carlsbad out of everywhere.
Yeah.
We're known for aliens and bad PBMs.
And bad, it was a bad hospital.
Oh,
gouging,
bad hospital.
Price gouging.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of that where it's, like extra charging for charging the insurance companies more, and then there's a lot of stuff that goes. So we talk about PBMs. What about pharmaceutical companies?
So I'm just going to talk about pharmaceutical companies really fast because the whole story, this whole podcast, I really want to talk about PBMs and where they came from and how they came to be where they're at now and how they're doing it. How are they extracting all this money?
Right.
And so pharmaceutical companies, we have all heard of brand names and drug prices, and it's possible. I'm here to say that it's possible that a lot of that is justified. You hear them make the claim that we have to do all this money in research and development. And it's kind of estimated that it takes several $1 million to do research and development for a drug. It depends on the drug. So there's huge ranges, but the average cost just for the FDA approval piece of it is about $19 million alone, just for the approval process. So those high price brand name drugs, while there are definitely stories and examples of really bad situations, they're probably fairly justified. And they play some games, but pharmaceutical companies are not the true bad actors in this story. It's the PBMs. So the PBMs, historically, they originally started, you have an insurance company, you have all these prescription claims coming through.
Right.
And this company formed that said, hey, we'll take care of that piece and we'll just charge a small flat fee per claim to take care of the claims processing. So everybody wins. It gets taken off the plate of the health insurance company. The PBM just focuses on that. They get a little bit of money for each transaction, and it was great. But then they started to exert more and more control over what was carried, how much it was going to be. And because they were the middleman,
right,
they could tell people what to do. And let's see. So they began to concentrate their power. So the larger PBMs, and I'm going to throw out some names because we've all heard of them, but the larger PBMs, they gobbled up the smaller ones. And so now we're left with three. We have CVS Caremark, Optum Rx, and Express Scripts. And it gets even worse than that. So now we know CVS is a pharmacy. So CVS Caremark is a pharmacy benefit manager, and they just acquired Aetna, an insurance company. So we've got the trifecta, the perfect thing.
Way to make money.
Yeah, every point in that process can make money, and they can put money back and forth to each other.
Between the employer and that's what's crazy to me, that the United States would allow that there wouldn't be a law for that.
There's got to be eventually, because this is getting out of hand. So another big one, and it's particularly applies to around here, is that Optum Rx is a pharmacy benefit manager, a big one, and they're affiliated with United Healthcare, a big health insurance company.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure everyone around town has seen all the signs of the DaVita clinics recently change to Optum. And so now they're even getting in the business of actual healthcare. And so I don't really know what all that means yet. I've tried to do a little research to figure out how that game is being played, but it can't be good.
No, I imagine if they're even at the clinic level.
They're at the clinic level. That's terrifying.
Yeah. Do they own hospitals?
No, I don't know.
Yeah. So that would be interesting to
deep
see if we get that,
but I know it's not good that all those clinics are named Optum now. So let's see. So they're infiltrating the front lines of healthcare. And I already said that they're controlling 76% of our costs, of our transactions.
Yeah, and that's crazy when you think about 76% of every transaction is ran through this trifecta.
Yeah.
That's basically what's going to happen if it
storm,
hasn't.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the largest PBM over the last 2 years had a net increase of 70% in their profits. It's a great business model. I'm in the wrong business. So,
because I know you gave me some of your notes here, and so I've been going through them. So rebates, kickbacks, legal extortion. Get into what are? Do they use the word rebate? Is that what they use?
Yes, of course they don't use the word kickback.
Right.
So there's several ways in how they're making all this money, and rebates is a big one. So we would call, you and I and everybody listening, we'd call them kickbacks. Right. And it's really it's a legal cartel. It's legal extortion, whatever you want to call it. But basically what happens, and this is where the big bad pharmaceutical company actually becomes like this little like David in the Goliath game, where the PBM says, hi, pharmaceutical company, you just spent millions of dollars getting this new drug to market. Right. We will not carry this drug unless you give us a rebate. Not only will we not carry this drug, we won't carry any drugs from your company on our formulary. Even if your drug is the cheapest in that drug class. And as a prescriber, I've seen that so many times where I will prescribe the drug that's appropriate, but the cheapest, and it'll get denied because it's a different drug that's in the formulary.
And so now there's no consumer benefit there at all.
None.
It's not helping the consumer at all.
No. And what makes it worse, and this is what should really upset companies, is that they're not getting any of that rebate. So if a drug costs $500, the PBM's getting $400, they're paying $500, PBM's pocketing the $400. And the insurance company will play, especially if they're in the same column, they'll play the game because maybe they'll get a little piece of that too.
Mm. Yeah. So everybody's, like you said, when you have that trifecta of all three of them, then everybody's getting a little piece of that pie. So one company could turn around and be making, and that's where I think we've got that, where you said those thousands % of profit, because that's literally what's happening.
So the pharmaceutical company has to play. They have to participate.
So how does this affect an employer?
Well, so they're paying a full price.
Right.
This person that's supposed to be lowering drug costs for them is not. In fact, they're pocketing money. So they're paying much higher prices. And I'm mostly just talking about level funded employers, self-funded or level funded, because they're the ones that are actually paying that price. If they're a fully insured company where it's the insurance company paying that price,
right,
they're not paying that price. There's things going on in the background of what they're not paying. But if the employer's paying, they're paying big for each.
So yeah, because in my brain is just thinking, if it's a rebate and it's only given from one company to the next, then you don't need to disclose that to that business. So
the employers
those
don't know
rebates,
that's happening.
Yeah, the rebates are not even brought into that. So you're just charging full price of what they suggest for that pricing.
Or let's say they do a discount. So that's what the company sees. They're like, oh, look, this drug was $500, but we got a discount. And so we're only going to pay $400, but they don't know that there's this huge rebate happening in the background too.
Yeah, that's absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So whenever you and I know you talk about this a lot when you prescribe drugs, is it almost, so when you submit it to the insurance company, because I want people to understand, so you prescribe something, what would be an example of this, like a prescription of something that you could think of?
A statin, so a drug for cholesterol.
Right, which is
many options.
Probably hundreds of millions of dollars because tons of people are on that.
Right, and that's a whole different podcast probably, but so I could prescribe the atorvastatin, totally generic, cheap, no big deal, and it may not be on the formulary. Right. It may be a more expensive statin. Still a statin. It's the same thing's going to happen for the patient. I'm not skipping ahead here, but I just want to understand this. Yeah. So under direct primary care, what if somebody just wanted to pay it outright through your clinic? That statin. Yeah, the statin. So there's a couple things that happen is one will,
and we're going to go back to this. I just want to.
Yeah. So one will prescribe the drug, and we look and pay attention to what's what in terms of cost. Right. So if a patient comes to us and they're already on a statin and it's a reasonably price statin, we're just going to keep them on that statin. And so for statin, the employer would pay like $4 a month. In fact, the employee would probably just pay the $4 a month. The employer wouldn't pay anything.
Right. So now whenever you're looking at, because this is very interesting to me because you have words in here like rebates, and then you have this one where it says fees.
Mm-hmm. So the PBM is also collecting fees like, oh, look at all this work we're doing for you. We're going to charge you $2. We're going to charge you, exactly. Right. We're going to charge you $2 per claim we file because, we're helping.
So that started out as the reasonable fee.
Yes.
And that was all that the PBM was supposed to do.
Right.
And then now that I imagine their fees have gone up too.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but it's such a small piece of it's probably the only transparent piece. It is the only transparent piece of the game that they play is the fees.
Yeah. And so I do option trading sometimes, and you have a word here that's with options. It's called spread. So I kind of know what that word means, but why don't you?
I think it's a gambling term, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a gambling term. Yeah. So which is funny for this, but what does spread mean when it comes to a PBM?
So the PBM, so the pharmacy gets the prescription, the patient pays their $10 copay, $20, $50 copay, and they get their prescription. The pharmacy files the claim with the insurance company, with the PBM.
Right.
And so the PBM says, all right, I'm the godfather. I'll give you $5 for this prescription. So the pharmacy's now made $15.
Right.
of the prescription. Okay, so they're done. Now the PBM says, "Hey, company, that prescription costs $50."
Mm.
And so they save they make $45 on the transaction. They paid the pharmacy $5. The company paid $50.
I wonder how much of our copay, I mean, some drugs, but I wonder how much of the generic common drugs that the copay is actually more than what the drug is.
Oh, that happens all the time. And there actually used to be gag orders and contracts with insurance companies that told the pharmacist that they could not tell the patient that this prescription is $4. If you didn't use insurance, instead of $10, it would be $4. They were not allowed to tell them. That went away in 2018. There's a law now, so that the gag orders are no longer, they're illegal. So pharmacies can now tell you. And people probably noticed that pharmacists started telling them. Like, hey,
but
by the way,
do they have to tell them?
They don't
by
have
law?
to.
Oh,
I don't think they have to. That's
that
a
would
good
be
question.
something you just fill it, get the copay, and move on. Because then everybody, like you said in that trifecta line, everybody's making profit.
Mm-hmm. Pharmacies obviously make good money because there's one on every corner.
Right.
But they actually are probably one of the smaller Goliaths, I guess, in this.
When you look at healthcare in general, I'm going to ask kind of a far out question, but when you look at healthcare in general, I know this is always fun when I do
never
this
know
to
what
you.
you're going to say.
So when you're looking at healthcare in general, do you believe that these companies are profiting off of our health? Like in the sense, is there an opportunity to fix our health with the science that we have, but instead they would prefer us to be hooked on all, because it's basically like they're making money off of people being unhealthy.
They're certainly not making efforts towards improving someone's health on diet, nutrition, exercise. As a provider, I'm a DPC provider, so I can give diet, nutrition, exercise advice. It doesn't matter because I don't have to worry about it. But if I'm an insurance-based provider, I don't get reimbursed for that. I can't code for that. I can't have a visit with somebody about how's your diet going? How many calories did you eat yesterday? That's an unreimbursable visit.
Yeah, that's nuts. So whenever you're looking at, and I'm not sounding smart, guys, I want everybody to know I'm looking at her notes. So I'm not asking these amazing questions like I know. So whenever you're looking at specialty drugs, how does that work?
So they're a little tougher because they are truly expensive. Like I talked about in the beginning, is that there was a lot of research and development in the FDA approval process. So they are truly more expensive. But in that column, there's also the specialty pharmacy. And a lot of times people are required to use that specialty pharmacy. And so they'll make money on that transaction. And maybe the PBM doesn't make as much, but it's all in the same group of companies that own each other.
That makes sense, yeah.
So they're still making the profit on the specialty drug.
So someone that has Parkinson's, that would probably be a specialty drug, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone that has Parkinson's, and I know that could be, you know, 1,000 or more a month.
Right.
You know, just taking those prescription drugs. So something like that, they would have to, you know, so they're taking this and labeling it special, and then you got to go to the special pharmacy, and then now the costs just go, the profits are just ching, 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 ching.
Yeah. On every level, every angle.
So why would you solve
imaginable.
Parkinson's if you can make all this money off of it?
Right.
See
No,
that's
I don't know that they're actively against that, but
yeah,
they're
exactly.
certainly enjoying.
Well, I
the
know,
situation
you know,
as it is.
because I'm going to get a little controversial here, but we know the tobacco companies were doing that.
Oh yeah,
they were purposely putting misinformation out there. They were saying, you know, it's fine, you
And
can
hiding
smoke, it's
stuff
not a
and,
big deal. They were paying people off going in. You know, I mean, this is when you get lots of money. You know, billions of dollars involved. It wouldn't surprise me personally, just saying this as a person, it wouldn't surprise me if something like that. I mean, if they're doing rebates and kickbacks and cutting themselves deals.
The PBM's not looking for the cheapest drug. They're looking for the biggest rebate or the biggest spread.
Yes,
that they can get away
exactly.
with.
But if you own it all the way down the line, then how I would look at that is I need every interaction to be the most profit. So what can we mostly profit from?
Right.
So how can I get the mass amount of people on this drug and get this trifecta just going ching, 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 ching?
So I don't have this in my notes, but so
you're going off notes?
But it's funny that you say that. But so the other piece of this extortion game is, and everybody's probably experienced this too, is the mail order pharmacy and the auto refill. And so anybody at your VA, so you probably may have not experienced this just yet, but a lot of people are basically being coerced, incentivized to use these mail order pharmacies. They're also being encouraged heavily to use auto refill. And so an auto refill is a horrendous game. So let's say somebody's on a statin and they're like, well, would you like to be put on an auto refill? And you're like, well, that sounds like a good idea. So I don't forget to refill my medicine. And then maybe you forget
It comes to your mail and you're all good.
for a week or two, you need it. And the next thing you know, you have 6 months worth in your medicine cabinet because you forget for here and there. And your doctor's getting prescription refills, or nurse practitioner in this case. And we've actually stopped in our clinic. So if it's a big pharmacy like Walgreens or CVS, we will not refill it based on a refill request because we have no way of knowing if the patient actually needs it. And so we have an automated text. As soon as we get a refill request like that, we text the patient and say, hey, we get these refill requests all the time. We have no way of knowing if you actually need this. Do you need this prescription? And I'd say about 50% of the time, maybe more, the patient says, no, I don't need that. And some of them will even take it farther and say, not only do I not need that, I told them to stop that crap. I told them to take me off the
it's automatic. It's automatic
but
deposits
it's money.
in their bank account.
It's money. It's money for CVS. Yeah. It's money for Express Scripts.
How many hundreds of thousands of people that's doing
They
that.
don't care that you have 6 months stockpiled in your medicine cabinet.
Yeah, we'll give you more.
And then and their claim is like, oh, we're helping compliance. No, you're not. There's just a stockpile in the...
Yeah, they're really good with compliance. We could look at the opioid.
Right. Yeah, they really know how to push a drug. They're drug push.
I saw
this.
this week they were getting sued again, and everybody's
the opiate. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a horrific thing. Yeah. So we look at this. We know how. Speaking of horrific, we know how bad this is. Everybody's getting raked over the coals. Employers are paying through the roof.
Employers
healthcare
and consumers.
Costs.
We're getting raked over the coals.
Yeah, we're getting raked over the coals. So what's the solution to this?
Well, like all difficult, complex problems, there's multiple solutions. So to start with, awareness, just listening to this podcast, understanding that this is happening in the background. There might not be a whole lot you can do about it as little old you, but in the big picture, just knowing that that's happening. And if you're a company saying that this is not okay and saying, I want flat fee pricing, I'm not going to use this PBM. You as my broker, I want you to fix this. I want to use a PBM that is transparent. And I'm not going to use the big three because of that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So employers don't, and companies don't realize how much buying power that they have. They have a lot of power.
I don't think employers think that. I mean, we had a whole podcast on that. Right. Yeah, I need to pick between these.
Yeah, these are my only options. And hopefully
can you negotiate?
Hopefully you have a good broker that's staying on top of the different ways of approaching this.
And if somebody thinks that their broker's like, or don't really like them, someone.
I have a broker in town that's really familiar with direct primary care.
Right.
But if you're not in Albuquerque or you're not in New Mexico, you really just can go to Health Rosetta. And that's a group that is really focused on trying to fix all these very complex problems. That's their mission.
It's a great name, Rosetta. Yeah.
Yeah.
With what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. They're translating and deciphering what's happening. And so they have Health Rosetta certified brokers. And these are brokers that have agreed and promised that they will follow good Rosetta guidelines.
Right.
And they have to get tested.
So that's healthrosetta.com?
.org.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. That'll be a great one.
In New Mexico, there's no Health Rosetta broker, although the broker I am talking about, she's working with them to get certified.
So she could, but I mean, she's legit. She's like honest and truthful and transparent.
I think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know her pretty well. So that would be somebody, if you're in New Mexico and you're having issues or you're questioning this, they could give you. They can
contact me and I'll
contact you
and
refer. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And I get nothing from that. Full transparency.
You're not going to be the PBM.
No, I'm not going to get a piece of every transaction.
Yeah, this is so. Not only so, what kind of power do employers have?
They have buying power,
right?
I mean, they're the ones footing the bill on this, and they need to stop it. And so, let's see. So linking up with a direct primary care provider like Life ABQ, which is the company I represent, we can dispense medications at lower cost. So taking what you already have and adding the direct primary care piece, it sounds like, oh, you're asking me to add money to what I'm already spending exorbitant amounts to. But no, what I'm telling you is like, yes, you're going to spend a little, you're going to have some cash outlay. But what I'm going to do is take all these inflated claims, and prescriptions is one of those, prescriptions and labs, and I'm going to move them over here where you're going to directly pay for them, and I'm going to shrink that cost. And it looks like pretty much all the studies show 30 to 40%. I'm going to shrink all these costs down by 30 to 40%. So you're going to save money. You're going to pay for the program just off of that. And then there's so many other benefits: better healthcare, better continuity, less ER visits. And so companies are footing the bill for their health health needs of their employees, they win. They win so big with direct primary care.
So, and that's something that they could go to. We've done several episodes to employers to talk to if they're looking at doing this, because you can't just, especially if you're, and you had talked about this before, and I thought it was so interesting in the human resource department, people are just kind of, okay, I'll accept the 10 or 17% increase every year. Yeah. I'm just going to kind of chill. If I can just sign this, we can have the quick meeting. We're done for the year.
Yeah.
And I've got to hire and fire people and do all kinds of other things.
Yes.
Where they're not realizing how much money sitting down and talking to you could save. And I know you have some stories on this, so I kind of wanted to.
It's funny you mentioned the less bad increase. I'm talking to a company right now. They're, as a lot of companies are right now, they're looking at open enrollment, and they're looking at the exorbitant costs that they're facing, that they faced in 2020, that they're going to face in 2021, and so they're talking to me now, and. The HR person, she said kind of offhandedly, she goes, "Oh yeah, we haven't gotten our premiums yet." And this is a game that they play, that they don't give that until the last minute. So there's very little room for negotiation because, we got to get open enrollment going. And so, yeah, here's this. And so they can't negotiate. They can't go talk to another supplier potentially. And so it's funny that she said, "Oh, they haven't given us those numbers yet." I'm like, "Huh, interesting." Part of the game.
Yeah, and yeah, because so instantly when I'm paying a bill to something, regardless of what it is, and I have to have a transaction that's going to be yearly with this, and I'm going to be using them, and I ask them to be transparent, and they are not, then I feel like I shouldn't pay for that. You know what I mean? That relationship is having issues now.
Yeah.
And so if you can't fix this, I don't want to be a part of you.
Right. It's unacceptable.
Right. It is. And so now you've played out like we have this great relationship and everything's good. The minute I ask for you to be transparent, now you're going to turn a blind eye or just ignore my emails or so employers need to, employers need to hound them, send the email, make the phone calls, whatever you have to do. But this is really important because this is costing you a ton of money. Yes. So you had some stories here on prescription drugs.
Preparing for this podcast, I kind of thought through my head a few medication stories that I'd had over, because Well Life ABQ started in 2017. We've mainly served individuals. And this year we're rolling it out to employers because we can save employers huge.
Right.
And, I want to do that. So, but several years ago, we had a new member, and his cardiologist referred him over to us, and he had been on generic Viagra, and it was costing. He was getting it from a Canadian pharmacy. It was costing about $150 a month, and he thought, wow,
Canadian Viagra. I wonder if it's different than American Viagra.
Totally not different.
Maybe I would want that Mexican Viagra.
Right.
I think that would be better.
Way to take this off the rails, there, Jason.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. This is funny.
So this member, he's a smart man. He's a savvy consumer. He was kind of leery of me to begin with, and now I'm his best friend. But so he comes in, and I said, I think it was probably a month or two into him becoming a member, and he asked me for the prescription because these Canadian pharmacies, they need a prescription written. They're still prescription drugs, and I said, "Oh, well, how much is that costing you?" And he told me about $150 a month, and that was good. That's a good deal for generic Viagra back then. It was a few years ago, and I said, "So what's your dose?" And he goes, "Well, 25 milligrams, one capsule." And I said, "Okay. So if I prescribe you a 20 milligram and I charge you, I forget what it was, $13, or I charge you $7, or you can get it at the pharmacy for $13. Does that sound good?" And he's like, "Yeah, that sounds great."
So he was paying $150, and it's $7 to $13. That's the difference.
I had to change the dose a little bit because of the way the different capsules are made.
So does doses play that big of a role with costs?
Not with sildenafil, it doesn't. Not with Viagra.
That's crazy.
Because the usual effective dose is 25 to 50 milligrams. So, but 20 was fine for him, but he could have easily gone up to 40 and still saving a ton of money. So right off the bat, I saved him the cost of his entire membership as an individual.
With the direct primary care.
Right.
Yeah, just off of one prescription.
So, and that was without insurance. He wasn't using insurance for this.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. So tell me more.
Okay, I've got more. Let's see. This was a lab story actually. So earlier this year, we had another member. He was a part of a large company, and he'd forgotten to update his insurance information with us when we sent off his labs. And so, of course, when the claim went through, his old insurance company denied it because he was no longer a member of the old insurance company. He got a bill in the mail for $700. So naturally, he called us. And normally we would just say, oh, no problem. We'll just let the lab know your new insurance information and they'll rerun it. Not a big deal. But in this case, the new insurance company required that he used a different lab than we had used. So we were really out in the wind. But thankfully, the lab that we had used was the one we're contracted with. And so his price was $54.
So he went from a $700 lab bill to a $54.
Yeah, he was pretty happy.
Yeah, I could imagine. So the $75 membership fee that you have, and I know employers, you know, if you time somebody's thinking, oh my goodness, 40 employees times $75 a month,
Right.
that's huge.
Right.
You know, and I don't understand it. You know, when you look at stuff like this, when you look at stuff like this and the amount of money that you're saving.
Yeah,
I mean,
labs and prescriptions, we do this all the time. Every single one of their employees that has gotten a lab or a prescription, we probably could save 50, 90%. And I'm not making those percentages up. They're big dollars.
That's crazy.
So, yeah.
So, whenever you look at why people object to this,
Yeah.
whenever we get, unless you have another story,
No, I'm good.
but whenever you looked at to, you know, what are the initial objections related to direct primary care?
So, of course, the cost, which
Right.
I feel like we kind of addressed. And so, yes, it's a little bit of a leap of faith or step of faith to go in. I'm like, oh, I can save you money, but here you have to pay this first, you know?
Right.
So that's an objection, of course. But I hear all the time that, oh, well, I could never force my employees to just go see one provider. You're only one clinic in the whole city. And I get that. That's true. You can't and you should not force your employees to come see one provider. But the truth is that they're already limiting their choice. They're like, oh, here's your provider network in your insurance company. Oh, and by the way, we changed insurance company, so you're going to have to start all over next year. And so now they're limited. The company itself can't change insurance companies because it's going to create this huge wave of all their employees having to go find a new primary care provider. And good luck getting into a primary care provider. And so the idea is that you pull this away and you say, okay, employee, we have this other piece. Now we're going to keep this in place, but we have this other piece that says, if you go to this clinic, it's going to be a $0 copay. Your appointments are going to be 30 to 60 minutes long. You basically are never going to see much of the waiting room because you're never going to spend any time in it. And you can talk to your nurse practitioner, you can text, and there's virtual options. Oh, and by the way, it's free 24/7 telemedicine for your whole household. You incentivize them to come see us. They come in and see us and they never leave. And
yeah, of course.
And then they tell their coworker, like, hey, by the way, you need to check out this clinic that our employer signed us up for. They're great. Now you've got a lot of your employees over here in this one column. You can do whatever you want in the insurance column because all your PCPs are over here.
So, because as an employer, so I'm looking at this, we'll use, whatever, and I have 40 employees and I'm paying $75 a month, so I do the math on that. I'm like, goodness gracious, this is a lot, straight up, I'm going to be paying this. But and we've talked about this before, because I think cost is always the issue with everything. You know what I mean? Especially now we're running leaner. COVID's kind of got us all.
PBMs are extracting every dime, sucking us dry. So yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at this. So it's like, why do I even want to have this conversation, or why do I want to? But what they don't realize is once they fight to get the information and give it to you, you can go over and actually show them all of the savings for that.
True. Yeah. So each individual, they're a little different. They have different needs. They have different claims costs. So it's best to just set an appointment with me and we'll go over like, what's the worst thing for you?
Right.
And maybe we can fix it. And rarely I'm like, oh, maybe we're not the best option for you. That's a pretty rare scenario. But if they can get their claims, and most companies can't, I can show them with historical data how I can save them money, but they have to be able to get their claims.
And what people don't realize with direct primary care, you're going to get, and you had wrote this down, but 30 to 60 minute appointment times, zero copay, no waiting.
Yeah.
You're able to text a nurse practitioner. You have virtual options,
right,
where you can Zoom with somebody or something. Then when you start looking at out-of-pocket costs for labs and medications and how, what did you say, 40 to 90% less?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then that starts getting, interesting.
Yeah.
If you take the time to get to understand the concept.
It's complex and there's many ways that we save money, and it's very simple. There's so many layers to how we can save money.
So when we get into cost, what is the cost for an employee and how does that work?
So it's $75 per employee.
Right.
And then if the company is going to cover or have the employee cover themselves, it's $30 per additional household member. So we don't get into like a spouse and is it legal marriage and all that. Just an additional household member, whether those are
partner
children,
or
partner, whatever you want to call them. So because we don't have a law around this of whether we can cover that person or not. So if they're in the household and they want to cover them, they can cover them. And the company could have a rule of what they're going to cover and what they're not, of course. But that covers 80 to 90% of healthcare needs. And that's actually another objection I get a lot. And I don't know if I can call it an objection, but just a disbelief, like that can't possibly be true because how can it be so cheap? And that's kind of the whole point of what we're talking about is healthcare really, for routine, daily chronic disease management, it's not that expensive. Hospital surgeries, those have big dollars, sometimes justifiably, but routine healthcare is not expensive. And so we do it for $75 a month, $30 per additional member of the household. And we've been doing it since 2017 in hundreds, and now we're probably getting to thousands of clinics are doing it around the country.
Yeah, that's crazy. It was interesting. Even on something like, I was talking to my cardiologist friend, and he stopped doing them, but putting pacemakers in, he was getting $1,500. $1,500. And he could stack them up, so, he could do 10 of them, so you're making good money. But how much did the hospital charge?
Right. And I'm like, that doesn't sound like all that much.
Yeah. He's like, they just whittled him down to, by the time everything was said and done, he got $1,500.
Wow.
So it's like, I'm not doing those anymore. The risk is it's not worth it.
Right.
For that
It's malpractice and
all that. Yeah.
Yeah. So my clinic doesn't have some back office with 3 full-time employees running claims.
And that's what most clinics have.
That's
they
why
have
I can charge $75 a month and do fine.
So if now can an employer, maybe they can't cover the 75, but they could, have you seen employers like split it?
Yeah,
that's
a good question too. And I encourage comes down to like, let's have the face-to-face discussion and tell me about your company. But I encourage employers to cover the full membership because most employees don't understand what's going on. The education, it's a steep learning curve. The employer has a hard time understanding what we're doing. And so I do encourage 100%. The additional household member, you can take it or leave it. Usually once the employee kind of starts to come see us, the traditional thing is the woman will come and then she'll drag her husband kicking and screaming. And then the 2 kids will be signed up. And so that's typically how it works. You get the first member and then
it goes from there. And there's states like Colorado, Seattle area, Portland, kind of more of these like forward thinking alternative type. They're rolling with direct primary care like crazy. Austin, Texas.
Yeah, for the most part, they've all heard about it.
Right.
And here, and that's actually another objection I get a lot. Like I have one member, he still hasn't signed up. Well, I guess he's not a member, he hasn't signed up, but he will. But he just can't wrap his head around it because he hasn't heard of it. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you about it now.
Yeah, New Mexico.
Yeah, he's like, what?
Mexico
How come I haven't heard of this? It sounds so great. And I'm like, well, you're hearing about it right now.
Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah. So so if you're a company, maybe you own a bike shop, let's say, and you have 10 employees, you can still sign up.
Yeah, so you're not that is going to be a line item on your budget.
But can you legally just offer
yes.
direct primary care?
Under 50 employees, you can. There's not a lot of laws around what you can and can't offer.
So if you have a great heart and it's something and you're like, I can't afford this, but I can afford you to have direct primary care.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pay the $75. And now your employees, the 10 of them, that are making $15 an hour or whatever, they can all have the ability to get bomb healthcare.
Yeah, we have several of those small companies.
Yes.
In there. And, we've had back pain and things that people would have ended up in urgent care or ER for because they had nowhere else to go because they didn't have insurance.
Because I was mentioning 40 employees a lot. So I wanted people to understand, you'll take an individual all the way up to
correct
a 4,000 employee.
Right. I can save the 50 plus employers the most.
Right.
Beyond
50
that,
plus,
we need
right.
to have a discussion. It's probably going to be a line item, but it's not an expensive line item, and it's
Right.
a transparent line item.
That's awesome. So anything else, Casey?
No, I think that's it.
We covered
About medications.
We've covered these meanies that are taking money from us.
The big meanings, the true cost of
you
your
had it in your
prescriptions.
notes. You had the dragon.
The dragon, yeah,
So,
the real dragon in the story,
real dragon.
right?
Yeah. I was like, wow. So who's slaying it?
Direct primary care, direct primary care organizations like Health Rosetta.
And so if somebody wants
Lots of people.
to get a hold of you before we end the podcast, what's the email?
So my direct email is Casey, just my initials,
Right.
at welllifeabq.com. If you just want to email the office where my office manager will help out, is hello@welllifeabq.com.
So, and I'll put that in the show notes. So it's hello@welllifeabq.com.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Casey.
Yep.